The video today is going to talk about roots and what is a root. Most of you would probably call these symbols square roots, which they are, but it's really a radical. Because if you look, we also have a cube root. So this video will be two parts. You'll have two different videos. This one's just going to touch on what is a square root, what is a cube root, and how do we find it. So definition. A root of a number is another number that when multiplied by itself a given number of times is x, meaning whatever I can multiply to get that number. So when you hear that, when a teacher says that, you're like, what? What in the world? Okay, kind of makes you feel like my Bitmojis. But if we can break this down, here's what it means. So most of you are probably sitting there saying, oh yeah, easy, square root of 25. Well, that equals 5. You're right. But how did we get there? Everyone says square root. Well, what does that mean? That means really we're sitting in that index, that is 2. 2 of the same thing that gets multiplied by each other. So that's why we say, okay, 5 times 5. That's what gives us 25. So when it's a square root, we're looking for two things being multiplied. And those two things being multiplied are always going to be the same number. Okay? Well, what do we think here? Okay? This is read as the cube root of 8. Okay? What does cube root mean? Well, it tells me that it's some number times itself, but 3 times now. So I know that answers 2. And here's how that came about. Because 2 times 2 times 2 is what gave me 8. So the cube root of 8 is 2. Are we getting the hang of it? Now, there really isn't a way to calculate this. You basically have to know it. There will be a calculator for some of these, but if not, we need to memorize our perfect square roots, so our perfect squares. So it's best to make a flashcard. On one side, you'd write the square root of 1. On the other, you'd write 1. We have the square root of 4. On the other side, you have the square root of 2. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 25, we just talked about, is 5. Square root of 36, you got it, 6. Square root of 49, 7. Square root of 64, 8. Square root of 81, 9. And square root of 100 is 10. Most of you probably remember these from previous years, but there's 5 more you should get under your belt this year and memorize. The square root of 121 is 11. The square root of 144 is 12. The square root of 169 is 13. Square root of 196 is 14. And then 225 is 15. Memorizing these now, and you will have practice on it, will help you in algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and every math from here on out. Besides the perfect square roots, you should also memorize a couple perfect cube roots. So there's more here than you should probably memorize, but be able to recognize these. So the cube root of 1 is 1. The cube root of 8, we already did this earlier, is 2. The cube root of 27 is 3. The cube root of 64 is 4. The cube root of 125 is 5. The cube root of 216 is 6. The cube root of 343 is 7. The cube root of 512 is 8. And the cube root of 729 is 9. It is in your best interest to have at least 1 through 6 somewhat under your belt, because you will see those. You'll see the cube root of 64, the cube root of 8, and the cube root of 27 a lot. You'll also see the 125 from time to time. So what I would do is make sure that if you haven't done so already, you've subscribed below as new videos come up. But take time to reflect, and in this time to reflect, what I would do is I would make my flashcards of my perfect squares and my perfect cube roots so that I can study.